The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Minnesota Socccer Podcast. Back once again after another exciting night at TCF Bank Stadium. A little bit colder, starting to feel the fall season going on. And I am on the phone, wishing I was there in person with Nick Hallett and Tom Schreier. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing?
I'm doing well. As I said before we got on air, it's been a busy week, but yeah, I'm excited to hear you guys talk about soccer.
I'm doing good. Just missing you, man. Wish you were here.
We should have parted more gently last night, Nick.
Oh God! No.
This is a G-rated podcast. Last I checked.
You're welcome. Tom, did you shed any tears over Joe Mauer today? I have to ask.
I did not. I will say this: the Twins have done a lot wrong in the at least the latter half of the Joe Mauer era, but I thought they did today very well, and I was very surprised to see him actually in catcher's gear, even if he caught one ball that was designated to be literally a ball that no one would swing at. But it was an interesting final day, what we assume is a final day for Mr. Joe Mauer.
Cool. All right, let's talk some soccer. So
that was my thoughts.
This is a Cardinals fan, by the way. That's the reaction you'll get.
I had a bad week. It's fine.
Yeah, that's right.
Moving on.
Moving on. Soccer was fun. So Minnesota United did play Saturday evening at TCF Bank Stadium against New York City FC, playoff standing team in the Eastern Conference, and came out with their second straight win at home. So the home road split continues to get even more hilariously stark for this team. 2-1 victory, a couple of really weird goals, and an excellent goal. Let's start with the lineup. So, Nick, you and I talked about this when you got into the game. Adrian Heath changed formations again with his starting lineup in this game. And partially because he was forced to because of the suspensions of Maximiano and Fernando Bob. What did you see in the 4-4-2 that he brought out to start last night's game?
I mean, I think the main takeaway was, as he told us after the game, which was kind of their overall shape and concept of pressing and knowing when to press as a unit. And that definitely, he talked about how it caused problems for New York City and how it was a major factor for Minnesota in this game overall. But I think we also started to see the beginnings of that in the Real Salt Lake game. And both of those games obviously have been wins and impressive wins at times, although they've had their dicey moments, as is United's custom. But yeah, I'd have to say the way that they lined up, and that's why I definitely gave Heath solid credit these last two games in the player ratings, and I mean obviously for him the manager rating, because his system and his setup going into these individual games has been good. And at the highest level, you, as people in other sports well know, you have to have a specific game plan for your specific opponent. You can't just show up and play the same way every time. And the last 2 weeks he's clearly done a pretty good job of doing that. It's hard to give him full on credit because, as we alluded to in both the last two wins, the opponents maybe fielded a slightly weaker team.
Well, and also both games have featured his typical tendency to make substitutions perhaps a little bit too late, to not make a full round of changes. And in this game in particular, we can get to the specific incident in a bit, but keeping players on with previous yellow cards when you have an option to change to on the bench can bite you. And in this game, it almost did bite them. So it's a thing where, like, I certainly don't want to trash Heath completely. They've gotten 2 straight wins, and he's used 2 different lineups I think he made 3 changes in this game, and stuff has worked. Things have worked in a different way. This game, one of the recurring themes from a like an analysis after the fact thing is, this is a game that Minnesota United won with Darwin Quintero not anywhere near his best, which is not common.
Yeah, it was a massive. It was huge. I mean, the fact that they were able to do what they did without him. I mean, this is one of the worst performances he's ever had as a member of Minnesota United by far, and that is because it's for obvious reasons that the bar for him is exceptionally high, but he was just kind of flat out poor in my estimation. Heath gave him a decent amount of credit in the post game, but for my money, he was overall pretty poor. And United is, as we've seen this season, struggled mightily at times and been a below average team. For them to be able to do what they did last night without him contributing a ton says a lot about the rest of the team. So that was for United fans. That was good to see.
For sure. And it kind of goes back to what the rest of the team looked like. So the three changes were some less surprising, some more surprising. The back four, you feel like, well, I'll put it this way. Is the back four that played last night, Jerome Tieson, Michael Boxall, Brent Kallman, and Francisco Calvo at left back, is that this team's best back four as currently presented? Yeah,
and it's a great question. That's the question I was, been asking myself. As I've said, really for these remaining games, kind of looking ahead and forecasting what's going to be taking place next year and where pieces are going to fit. And yeah, that's another one I was really tossing around last night at the game. And for my money, as things stand, as this roster stands, and you have to think that there's going to be a lot of additions and definitely a decent amount of subtractions, and just overall, who knows, it could be a decent amount of shakeup this offseason. But as it stands right now, absolutely, for my money, that's your best back four. Brent Kallman his value is he's playing very, very well, but he's one of those guys who has added value because his contract's so cheap. Michael Boxall is your veteran, 30-year-old guy who's, played at the international level with New Zealand, really provides a lot of stability, has been also one of your most solid performers throughout the season. So those two at that combo in the center makes tons of sense, especially since the only other guy you could kind of wedge in there, Francisco Calvo, has been utterly poor there at times this season. And because, as we've talked about numerous times, he is much better suited to be somewhere else, and at left back is definitely one of those places. And he's your captain and one of your highest paid players, so you have to have him in the team somewhere. So left back it is. And then for my money, Jerome Tieson is really classy on the ball and off, arguably off the field. Talked to him a few times. Nice guy, and goes to nice restaurants, what have you. But he is very, very good, and I think to the casual fan, he's someone that would fly under the radar, even if you went to every single game, just because he's not always involved at outside back. But man, I mean, I definitely rate him far higher than Carter Manley, than even Tyrone Mears, who's obviously no longer with the team, than Eric Miller, than Mark Birch. And that's the other thing about Tieson, is he could play on both sides fluidly without skipping a beat. And so, like I said to you last night at the game, I really am just concerned that there'd be any reason maybe he wouldn't stay. He seems to like it here, but man, that would be a huge loss if Tieson didn't resign.
A quick thing on Nick's little note on Jerome Tieson being an awesome dude off the field. I want to share Jerome's second most recent tweet that I saw this morning, and just made me smile because I can almost see him saying it. That feeling when you know and gave directions instantly for the first time. #these tourists. #myhood.
That's awesome.
He's just a nice guy.
Dude, he's so nice. He's so nice.
So yeah, and it was like this is one of those things where, obviously, in the start of the season, there were so many questions about how best the defense was going to be constructed and what was going to work. And outside backs have been that one of those question points for a lot of that time. With Tieson being a part of that discussion, but having been hurt for so much of that season, you forget a little bit that coming into the season, he was the guy. He's the guy. And if Calvo is he's absolutely able to play on the outside of defense. And if he continues to be willing to do so, I know he mentioned to media after the Salt Lake game that he would prefer to play in the center, but he's clearly got a lot of skills that work really, really well on the outside, and the attacking moments that he can provide when he makes those runs that he's able to do from outside back that he would never be able to do from the middle are another wrinkle, another playmaking thing for this Minnesota United attack to have, because there were moments last night where he was a serious threat coming down the left wing of the field.
I mean, yeah, so let's
it feels like it works.
Yeah, let's remember one of the best chances of the entire game. Darwin Quintero somehow doesn't score. You'd bet your mortgage on him scoring there. You'd bet Tom's mortgage too. I mean, it was
Feel free to do so.
Yeah, I know you've given me clearance on that, and it's unbelievable that he doesn't score that. But all of that was created by a Calvo cross, and it was arguably the easiest chance. Well, actually, it wasn't. Actually, that's inaccurate, because the other chances were unbelievable for Angelo, but it was by far, in a way, for either team, the third best chance of the entire game with a great cross.
Well, and he was under pressure, and the fact that he hit the cross just perfectly to Darwin it would have been a very good cross had he not been under pressure, and he was, I think, had two defenders on him and still managed to get inch perfect hard hit cross right to Darwin.
Yes.
He is a classy player when you unlock him. So let's talk about Angelo, since you've gotten to that point. The striker, the Christian Ramirez replacement that people are going to keep talking about until the end of time. We on this podcast have praised his work rate, have praised his control of the ball, and a lot of things about him, but the goals haven't come. Saturday, the goals came. Two very well taken goals. May not have had the highest degree of difficulty in the world, especially the second one, but he did his job and got his just reward for what I thought has been a great demonstration of what he can bring to this team and has been bringing since he came to Minnesota.
Yeah. Neither high difficulty that goes without saying, but like he buried them, and like in a way that there was zero doubt on either of them that he had it, right? That it wasn't like, oh man, he just got that one. No, like that's why you sign a DP at striker, because in those moments, he's gonna take those ones. The bunnies, he's always gonna slam dunk them. You know what I mean? And that's what he did. Both those goals were basically alley-oops, and he dunked them, and not everyone can do that. And it looks easy when a guy that good does it, but it is obviously not. I mean, especially even the first one, Miguel's cross is phenomenal and really couldn't be in a better place. But it's not easy to be athletically in that space, make the jump properly, and hit a ball at that speed with your head. It doesn't. And actually, even on the second one, the back pass, and there's a couple different things to it, but I would even say, if you want to look at it, again, always fun thing to do when it comes to Minnesota United fans is compare this to Christian Ramirez. I don't think Christian's got the wheels to do everything on that play that was needed, and definitely doesn't have the wheels to make it as easy as it looked for Angelo to round the keeper, right? That's again where I feel Angelo is has a clear different skill set when it comes to speed than Christian.
So the second goal, you and I talked about this last night after it happened, and we'd gotten a chance to look at some replays. You gave more credit to Angelo's sense of the ball than I did originally on first view. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it looks like, especially in the first run of play and even on the replay, actually the replays even like exacerbated, because it looks like the NYCFC left back just passes it right to Angelo, and then he's one-on-one with their goalie and scores, and it's like, dude, why would you do that? Like, what are you doing? Like, you play pro soccer? But if you actually know the game a little bit, or kind of watch the replay from a little further back, you see that the left back, upon receiving the ball, that picture he took in his mind of what the spacing of everyone was, is Angelo didn't exist yet. And specifically, Angelo's behind one of the center backs, so you really can't see him. But in general, he doesn't see Angelo at all. And so what Angelo does really well is anticipate that back pass might happen and goes either way. And then it does. and he's there, and the guy could have he'd already made up his mind to do it, and without seeing Angelo. And I like I said, a lot of people would see it as just a really stupid play, and there's a lot more to it than that. And you'd also lose the concept that Angelo should get credit for creating that when it doesn't maybe look like he did.
Yeah, Angelo talked about it after the game and said he knew that the defender was just looking at the goalkeeper, so he was ready to pounce on the ball, and just he kind of did. Nick and I went through and looked at the replay almost frame by frame, and just it was hard to see where Angelo was at from the defender's position. So it was smart, but Angelo also kind of took care of business on a poorly executed pass. So there's elements of both to that, but like on first view, I'm like, what is that pass? Like, what happened? Also, shout out to the New York City defender who made that play for having the most nominative determinist name I've seen in a pro athlete in a while. His name is Ben Sweat.
So literal.
Ben Sweat.
There you go.
Just gonna leave that there for a bit. And now the first goal. So what was it? Was it 2 or 3 minutes before this goal that you were trying to talk a little bit about Miguel Ibarra, Nick? Was that right?
I may have been throwing some trash around. I may have been spitting.
And then Miguel Ibarra puts in a picture-perfect cross that is right where Angelo can just bury it in the back of the net. Just to put a little exclamation point on it. And I really enjoyed that moment.
Yeah, okay. So just, to pull back the curtain, basically, I was talking trash about Miguel Ibarra because I know David loves Miguel Ibarra and thinks he's
This is so
the next
predictable.
Lionel Messi or something. So I'm just having fun.
But yeah.
I don't think Miguel's like trash, but I'm just having fun with that concept, right? And I'm poking fun at Miguel here and there. And then Miguel does make the play of the game. And furthermore, goes on to have a night where he completes, I don't know, just 100% of his passes.
Yeah, I went back to check. He missed one pass in the 76th minute.
The cross, because I saw that just as a highlight. Like even I, as a non-expert, was like, that was sweet.
For sure. Wait, he missed one? I thought I saw a tweet or a report that he was 100% on the night.
Yeah, I have it pulled up on the chalkboard on the MLS Soccer website, and they've got him with one like short missed pass in the attacking third in the 76th minute. So that could be different than what the stat sheet had. I don't have the post game stats that they handed out after the game last night to cross check that with. He was at or near 100% on the night, which for a player that's looking to attack in most, if not all, of his movement is kind of crazy, actually. Like,
no, it's definitely impressive.
He had an outstanding night.
Yeah, no, it's definitely impressive. Absolutely.
And I just give a little bit of Nick go.
I was just gonna say I still don't think he's necessarily U.S. national team material in my opinion, by any stretch. But that's a different discussion, I suppose.
If I may cite one of our fellow.
That doesn't necessarily give it more clout, but go ahead.
That's fine.
I know what you're going to say.
Just to cite a tweet from The Athletic's Jeff Reuter right after the goal. Crosses don't get much better than this. Miguel Ibarra puts it in a spot that's impossible for the striker not to score. Give the guy a USMNT look.
Oh, okay. That doesn't...
Just gonna put it there.
Yeah, I don't know that does anything for me.
That's fine. I just saw that and was very satisfied. It's like the thing with me is how old is Miguel? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, he is 27 or 28.
28. He's not necessarily what the U.S. men's national team needs now as far as building to the future, because he's not a player that, like, he'll be 32 in 2022, like probably tail end his career, probably trailing down. He might be a good guy to have in while you're like transitioning between this time and all of the great young players and young talent that the U.S. men's national team has, even if it's just like he's a squad player, he's only there to come off the bench. It seems like he's a dude that could be an asset to where the U.S. men's national team is at right now. I don't know. I know you don't agree with that, but I'm kind of curious what your take on that is.
Nah, but I mean, no, but fair. I mean, you make a good point, but I mean, ultimately, I disagree.
He's not a long-term prospect.
Well, absolutely. And I think you make a decent point, but I mean, if you look at the U.S. men's national team, if you know what's kind of happening right now, there's two things. If you're on that team, you're an up and coming prospect, or a prospect that has somewhat established themselves, or you're a vet. It's one of those two things. So you're basically either a prospect or a vet, and Miguel is neither of those things. Even though he has been on the team like really briefly, he definitely would not qualify as a vet. And frankly, again, if you take into account the most recent U.S. men's national team games against France, against Mexico, both games where they had great results and played well, it's clear that this team doesn't need to get. It doesn't need stopgaps. It doesn't need bridge players, because the Tim Weahs of the world, the Weston McKennies of the world, the Tyler Adams of the world are ready, and they're fine, and there's plenty of them. So Miguel is, in my opinion, utterly and completely irrelevant.
Well, and that to me is more of a statement about the state of the U.S. men's national team than it is about Miguel as a player. So, like, that's my 2 cents. But I know we're not going to actually agree on that. Yeah.
I guess there could be an argument that if the U.S. was in a place where it kind of like you rewind like 4 years or 6 years ago, and Miguel's doing this, you could argue that he's a decent bench player potentially.
Yeah, like I'm not saying he should start for the national team. I don't think that's ever been true.
Yeah,
but like,
and that's when he came into the team, was a few years back. So. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it makes some sense. I think the other problem he would have is, like, what position does he play? Because I don't think at that level, he certainly doesn't, from my opinion at least, isn't dynamic enough to be a winger. But, like, if they were playing, if they could play, and the U.S. men's national team isn't potent enough to have, wing backs, but I feel like that's where his best position would be, and it's something he's played this season with United. But a wing back is something I could picture him in.
Yeah, so there's a lot of moving parts there. Not necessarily all of them have to do with Miguel's skill himself. So I think it's an interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, and I guess also, again, and as I try to be on this podcast consistently, admirably, humbly so, I'm fair to the players. And so what I would say in fairness to Miguel is he is having a great season. He has definitely been one of the best players on this team throughout the season. He's definitely been one of the most consistent performers on this team. I mean, this is a guy heading into this season. The argument can be made that he might not be able to be an MLS regular, might not be able to be an MLS last year at times, might not be able to be an MLS player. Yeah. And he, to his credit, has definitely dispelled those notions. I wrote for my piece for zonecoverage.com last night that based on what he's done this year, and especially these last few games, this is a guy who has written his name in pen into this squad and is pushing for some level of starter minutes potentially.
Yeah, like it will depend on the signings and the offseason movements, but I 100% agree with that. I think Minnesota United has 4 games left on the season, and we're going to have a lot more to talk about of like season wrap-up stuff as the month of October rolls out with these last 4 games. But it's interesting you bring up one of the best players of the season. It's clear that like there is a Darwin Quintero class of that, and then there's a non-Darwin Quintero class of that, because the Minnesota United's best player this season has been Darwin Quintero. That should be 100% guaranteed vote by everyone who's ever watched this team ever. Like, that's not a question.
Facts.
The non-Darwin class is interesting.
Well, I think it would almost be fun. What if we did like in a future podcast, or I mean, heck, I'd be down to maybe impromptu do it right now, but like a little like end of season awards. Best this, best that, most improved, stuff like that. Would maybe be kind of fun.
I think it's something that there's a little bit of a sample size left to work with it, so I don't want to jump too hard on it. I think it's pretty clear that if we set out some categories, there'd be front runners for a lot of things, like your most improved, your best player in each position, or stuff like that, best rookie even. But I think it would be good to do that after these last 4 games have resolved. Because what if Angelo goes out and scores 6 goals in the last 4 games?
Yeah,
things can happen. So I think it's a thing that we're gonna file and we're gonna develop as we move towards the end of this season and towards the off season. How did you feel the game last night was refereed as a whole?
Not something I had necessarily been tossing around a ton. I thought it was fine. I thought it was the one decision that stood out was an NYCFC penalty claim, which on first look appeared to be a pen, and he didn't give it. Beyond that, I can't recall anything that stood out.
So the thing that sticks out for me is it seemed like the ref was trying to let stuff play a lot. And it was starting to get to a point where it was perhaps getting a little bit out of control, especially in the second half, as you started to see more and more dives and rolling around on the pitch from New York City players. Particularly the one that drew the most ire of the crowd was Alexander Ring, who arguably got fouled, might not have gotten fouled, went in a 50-50 and lost out on possession. Foul wasn't called. He's down on the turf, laying there, not moving very much. Play is continuing. Minnesota United are starting to attack down the right side, opposite side of the field. New York players are complaining, play out of bounds, he's hurt. So Minnesota, through the goodness of their hearts, Minnesota nice, all that jazz, play it out of bounds, play stops. Ring immediately stands up. And that may have been the loudest point the stadium was at last night, because boy, was the supporters section not happy with how that resolved itself.
Yeah, I think they got a little dive happy at times, NYCFC, but apart from that, I mean, I don't think that's up to the referee. I don't think that he had an effect on
it's
that.
one of those things that it's not necessarily on the referee for that to be a thing, but it just seemed like because of the lack of calls they were getting, they might have felt more prone to go towards diving. I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, I think they just got a bit again, like Portland did when they're down.
Yep.
And they're looking to try to get back in the game in any way they can. One of the quickest and easier ways to do something like that is to go to ground a bit easier. So I think there was an element of that. Yeah.
The other play that I know drew some questions in the first half that I saw a replay of, and it looked not great. There was a moment in the first half where Darwin Quintero was getting possession of a ball and may have thrown an elbow that may have connected in the head or neck area of his defender, which play stopped for a decently long time, and the replays I've seen of it looks as bad or worse than the foul that got Fernando Bob a straight red card last week. So the fact that the ref chose not to go to VAR on it may have significantly altered how the game played out, because it didn't look great on replays for Darwin. And if Darwin gets sent off in the 35th minute of this game, that changes the complexion of this game a whole lot.
Yeah, quite drastically. I think the other refereeing thing that was a bit peculiar was the lack of VAR use, as you touched on there, be it with that or NYCFC's goal late on. I mean, Heath said in the postgame, I think he summed it up well, because it's something you would have felt as a fan watching that game, but even as a guy who's watched a lot of MLS myself, it's and a lot of soccer in general, it's kind of confusing. And he said after the game, because there was multiple times where the ref put his finger to his ear but never went to the review booth, and
like several times.
Yeah, and after the game, Heath was like, either we have VAR or we don't. And
the full quote from Heath on that, I've actually got that. That's in my game story. For some reason, the players are saying that the referee said something about, we have the wrong angles for VAR. We've either got VAR or we have it, so I don't really know. I'd like to see it again in regards to NYCFC's goal. One of our TV guys thought he was offside. I'll have to see it again. So, like, it sounds like it's another, not necessarily anti-VAR thing, but the execution of how this has been it's happened in Minnesota several times in both positive and negative ways this season as to how it's been implemented, whether it's been implemented, whether it hasn't been. This was a game of it didn't seem to have been implemented at several times in which it probably should have been.
I think it's standard though across all leagues that are using VAR on some level, because it's not been. When you watch, I think the Bundesliga uses it, and I've watched other MLS broadcasts. It's a similar feeling that people at times are not clear on how everything's supposed to run.
Well, and it was announced this week that it's going to be in the UEFA Champions League next season, which means that I think as of next season, England will be the only top European league not using it. And MLS uses it, and a lot of now the global or continental competitions have started to use it. So it's getting to the point where it's starting to be universal enough that there need to be some improvements to how it's implemented, whether that's in the technology, in the communication. So it's a story that's going to continue to develop for years to come, not just like the end of the MLS season, but across all of world soccer in every league that it's implemented in, how it's communicated to players and media, how, like, what camera angles are necessary, what the costs are to a team hosting a game. I know that was something that came up in a lot of questions about Champions League games, is for the smaller teams from smaller countries and teams that might not have the budgets, are they going to be able to afford to have it in their home stadiums in a Champions League match? And it's a story that I think is going to be very interesting following the global game of soccer for a long time to come.
Yeah, you have to imagine it's going to become more streamlined and get better. But I think I don't know about you, but I mean, my overall feeling on VAR is pretty thumbs up. It doesn't seem to be too time consuming and seems to have helped a decent amount. So it doesn't bother me if it becomes more implemented in more leagues. So I'd give it a thumbs up.
We had the time to almost time it out last night with New York City's goal, which sort of went to VAR. And it was about 2 minutes of review time before the goal was finally given. And that's like, it's a long stoppage in terms of a soccer game, but on a wider scale, it's pretty manageable. And so it extended the stoppage time of this game by a couple of minutes, but like, you'll have that. You have that for an injury stoppage. You have about half of that time for a normal goal stoppage. Like, yeah, it's not a thing where we're stopping for 5-10 minutes to get this figured out. That completely throws off the flow of the game.
Yeah, that would be too much. And I think at this point, again, how I've seen it and been a part of it, I think it's worth it, because nothing's more frustrating than watching a game and a guy's obviously onside scores and they call him off, and it's like, dude, come on, or vice versa. So in that sense, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a good thing. It has the potential to basically only get better, which is the thing I like about it, is we can clearly outline some things that could be better about it, but it's going to be hard for it to get worse than it currently is. I think that's a fair statement to say. The refereeing decision that I don't think was in question was Colin Warner getting himself sent off, which normally, like, when there's a red card in a game, you feel like that's a major point of discussion. But like, Warner's first yellow was right at the end of the first half. Definitely a yellow card foul. Pulled the guy back on attack. Second foul, 75th minute. Definitely went in late. missed the ball completely on a guy. Did not need to go down. Wasn't in a dangerous position. And that was a little bit disappointing. And it was at the timing, like Nick and I had jokingly been tossing back and forth the idea of when is this going to go wrong? We're sitting here with a 2-0 lead, looking pretty comfortable. And then, like, on the clock, 75 minutes, immediately Colin Warner gets himself sent off. And like, all right, here we go.
I think it could have been avoidable. And that, I think that's kind of one of the questions you have to have is, why is Heath not looking to take that guy off?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially, I mean, in that position, that game context, it makes all the sense in the world to take him off. And I've not been one of the guys that has joined the bandwagon on Heath and not using his substitutions. If he only wants to use 2 out of 3, I guess that's fine. But this is where it's perplexing, and I don't understand exactly. He just wants to hold things so close to the vest and keep the few cards that he can play for its seemingly the dire stages. But man, that is not when games are decided. Almost every soccer game has crucial moments in the 65th through 80th minute, and he routinely doesn't want to use subs at those times, and I don't understand it. And last night, every coach,
Warner wasn't even the sub we wanted, right? We wanted Alexi Gomez to come off.
I mean, no, I might not have relayed it to you, but in my mind, every coaching bone in my body was like, when are we taking Warner off? Because they're up 2-0, they're pushing. Guys are going to have to put tackles in. So you don't want to have a guy who's restricted in doing that and let someone go by him or get the second yellow. And Warner is not a cornerstone in this team. He is not a prominent player necessarily. So that is the model of who you substitute off in this game situation. And he didn't do it.
And it's not like
it backfired.
And it's not like the two yellows weren't bang bang. It was before halftime that he got his first yellow. So like you hit 60 minutes in this game and you're like, okay, look down the bench. You've got France Bangop, Harrison Heath, Ibsen. Okay, just put Ibsen on in the 60th minute. Like, seems like the easiest change in the world, avoids problems, doesn't happen. Heath makes his first change after the red card, 79th minute, takes off Angelo Rodriguez, brings on Eric Miller, goes to 5 at the back to shut shop up after the red card. But like, again, it's the same thing we've talked about with Heath and his substitutions for a while, is that it feels like every single game his substitutions are responding to something that went wrong rather than preempting something that's going to go wrong. And this is just another example of that. Like, this was a preventable red card from a coaching standpoint.
Precisely. And it's hard to grasp because the dude is wildly experienced and knows umpteen things about soccer and all of that goes into it. And so for him not to do some of the more like simple and straightforward plays is confounding.
Yeah, and I will say, if we want to get technical on the 3 subs, he was readying, I think, Pangop to come on in like the 96th minute.
I think it was Toy, but yes.
So he never came on.
Yeah. It was Toy, but yeah.
Was it Toy? Okay.
Yeah.
Like, it must have been Toy for Darwin then, I guess. Like,
I hope Toy doesn't have like appearances bonuses in his contract, because he'd probably be pretty bummed that he didn't.
Because he was ready to come on. Like, he was on the sideline at the fourth referee, ready to go, and then play just never stopped until the end of the game. Like, so if we want to get really technical on the 3 subs, he tried. Just late.
But too late, which is how he rolls with his subs.
Also, shout out to, I said this completely in joke to Nick sitting in the press box, that when we were discussing after Alexi Gomez turned back into bad Alexi Gomez in the second half, like, wait, you should take him off. He said like 4 straight turnovers that have led to half chances for New York. Let's take him off. And I'm like, you know what? Let's bring Harrison Heath on. Harrison Heath hasn't played in months. What could go wrong? Lo and behold, the change made in the 83rd minute was Harrison Heath for Alexi Gomez, which I called, but not seriously.
Right. Now you're tricking the listeners because you tried to take credit for it. You tried to say, I told you. And I was like, bro, I have not given you that one. You were joking when you said that.
I cannot in good conscience say on the podcast that I seriously requested a Harrison Heath substitution.
But, I mean, good for Harrison. That dude hasn't gotten any love from his own dad in a long time.
Yeah, like it's he last played in the loss at Houston on July 7th and has like he started the New York Red Bulls game that was an away game they started an entire second team for and got smashed, and has played, other than that game in March, he's played 4 competitive minutes this year.
Yeah, it'd be tricky. You'd want to like interview Harrison about that, but like it would kind of just be like an awkward interview potentially. Like, hey, dude, like, why doesn't your dad ever play you? Like, what's up with that?
Does he still love you?
Is he still mad that you never cleaned your room in 5th grade? Like, what's happening here?
So, and he was, I mean, fine. Nothing happened that was specifically bad related to him, so you'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't do anything of consequence at all, really.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's one of those things like why you don't play or rate dudes that come out in the 85th minute.
Right. Like, I think he completed one useful outlet pass that killed some time. I do recall that. So there's that. That one's for you, Dad.
Yeah, I was going to say in the 95th minute, he had a successful outlet pass. I think to Miguel, if I remember right. So there you go. Useful player. Should start next week now. Let's you and I briefly talked about looking ahead to next week's lineup while we were waiting for Mr. Heath to come out next week. The changes that are likely to come out, both Maximiano and Fernando Bob are unsuspended, and I assume both of them will start. I think the biggest question going into next week as far as what the lineup's going to look like is where Romario Ibarra's fitness is at, because you'd like to see him start. And I know that they said this week his hamstring injury wasn't as bad as they thought it might be. But if he doesn't start, do you bring Alexi Gomez back for a second straight start? What do you think the lineup's going to look like next Saturday at Philadelphia?
Well, while I answer something about Romario, remind me of my options, if you will. But what I would say is the likelihood that Romario plays is exceedingly low. I mean, the way he pulled his hamstring, the way he pulled up in the manner that he did and the timing that he did. I think he's mentioned a comment post game that he heard or felt something pop or something.
He did. Yep.
Yeah. So he's not coming back for a while. There's just no way.
So
I'm Harrison Heath's uncle if he comes back next week.
So you're Adrian Heath's brother. Okay. Interesting.
That was what I was going for.
Yep. All right. So if they hold the 4-4-2, then you drop Warner, obviously, and that's the question. Rasmus played the other center mid spot this week.
Yeah, I mean,
so
it'll be interesting to see. Basically, it's seemingly, unless I'm forgetting someone, it's between Pangop and Alexi for the outside mid slot.
Yep.
I thought Alexi was pretty poor throughout. He was
good in the first half.
A little bit in like the first 15 minutes. And then he just kind of went back to being a little bit of a loose cannon. And so, but I think maybe from my gut feeling, Adrian rates Alexi a little like higher than other guys, and so it seems like he'll probably start again. But man, like I told you on Saturday, Pangop makes so much sense because unless you've kind of already made up your mind, and I think if Alexi starts, that might imply what he thinks of Pangop. But to me, it makes perfect sense to give old France a chance on the left, especially from the start, which he rarely ever has gotten. So that makes plenty of sense. Yeah, it's interesting not only next week, but going into next year, what you do with Rasmus. Especially if you retain Maximiano.
Yep.
But I mean, Maximiano, even if he stayed and even if he was a starter at times, I don't know that it wouldn't be hard to like rotate him with Rasmus. But you'd think he'd want some flow and chemistry there.
Yeah, for sure.
Maximiano's on loan, so I think there's a decent chance that he goes potentially. Maybe he'll stay. I don't know. Hard to say. And then it would be
basically goalie's not changing. I don't think the back four changes. Like, I think that back four is starting.
All right, and we laid that one out a little bit earlier.
And I think Angelo Darwin start up top.
Well, I don't know if it's gonna be a 4-4-2 next year. Are we talking about next week or next year?
I'm talking about next week.
Okay.
Like the game that is happening next Saturday.
Okay.
So I think Angelo Darwin start up top, and then it's what the midfield looks like, how the remaining four players are shaped, whether it's like you have like Darwin shifting back behind Angelo a little bit and playing like Miguel and Alexi next to him with Maximiano and Bob behind as the defensive midfielders, or if you take a more traditional four midfield approach and have Alexi and Miguel on the outsides and then 2 of 3 of Maximiano, Bob, and Schuler, or like there's a few options for how it can lay out, but I feel like the only questions are in the midfield. Like defense and attack seems pretty much set at this point.
Yeah, I think if he wants to return the duo of Brazilians and put Bob and Maximiano in there, he might want to and might feel like they have a good fit. They might like playing with each other, so he might go that route. And then I think you'll see, you just would go right to that route. Miguel's out on the right, France or Alexi are on the left, and then some form of Darwin and Angelo are up top. Another option, and I wouldn't hold my breath on this not happening, would be if he goes back to the 4-3-3.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking as looking at that.
Yeah, and he plays Maximiano, Bob, and Schuler in a 3-man midfield, and then Angelo through the middle, Darwin on one side, and Miguel on the other.
On the other. Yep.
Yeah.
That's basically what they did against Salt Lake 2 weeks ago, with back four Maximiano and Bob, Maximiano, Bob, and Schuler, and then Romario, Miguel, and Darwin as at the top. So that would only be Angelo changing, which happened in that game when Romario did his hamstring. So
yeah,
like that would be exactly the lineup minus Tieson in for Eric Miller, who started that game, would be the only change from that starting lineup. So that probably makes the most sense.
Yeah, and to me that's your best lineup from a Heath perspective, because you remove Alexi from the equation, which I think is addition by subtraction, and
I agree.
And then you get Rasmus on the field. You also have a setup. It'll be a 4-3-3, but essentially at times is going to be obviously a 4-5-1, which Heath has consistently shown that he definitely likes to have a 5-man midfield if he can. So my inclination, given that, would be that's where Heath would go if possible. I think the reason he did the 4-4-2 was that NYCFC shape dictated that. Based on something they saw in film. So, yeah, I would think if he could, that you'll see a 4-5-1, 4-3-3 of some sort come next week.
Yeah, and you've got Philadelphia coming into the next game. They had a double game week this week because they played in the U.S. Open Cup final, which they kind of got whooped 3-0 by Houston. And they played against Columbus on Saturday and had a 0-0 draw, which did not help them in the playoff race. Philly is currently sitting in 5th in the Eastern Conference and is close to securing a playoff spot. They need probably one more win if they get a win this weekend, they're pretty much set, because DC is still 9 behind them. And Montreal is well within DC's grasp for the 6th spot. So Philadelphia's got enough to play for. They're probably going to be pretty up for this game. And we know what Minnesota United on the road looks like. So,
gosh, come on, dude. Like, buck that trend. Like, this is like, that's so lame too. Because like otherwise, like 2 wins on the bounce, team's in good form. You got good ideas for team shape and how you want to go forward. Like, great playing against a potential playoff team who really has something to play for, which is not what either the last two teams. Well, either way, last two teams playing kind of like light on some regard, and
two teams having busy schedules more than anything else.
Yeah, true. And so, what an ideal like test ground for Minnesota United. But it's really hard not to picture it just going into that same old narrative we've seen what seems like thousands of times of, well, they played on the road, so they were terrible.
So, and some numbers, let's look at the good parts of home while we can. I wrote some of these numbers up in my recap last night on zonecoverage.com, which you can find. If you just look at the home record this season, Minnesota United are one of 6 teams in MLS to win at least 10 games at home. Only 6 of the 23 teams have won 10 games. We talk about the home road split being a fact for almost every team in MLS. United have been one of the 6 best home teams in MLS this season. And that's notable. Like, the fact they've been so abysmal on the road is another part of this equation. But, like, only 6 teams have 10 road wins. There are a couple more that can get there with the close of the season, but like that's a landmark. They hit their 11th win of the season total this weekend. That beats last year's total. Last year they won 10 games total, and they hit 36 points with the win this weekend. That was last year's point total. So any points they secure in any of these last 4 games, 2 at home, 2 on the road, will be improvement, like numerical categorical improvement from last season's form, which we can argue about how much better the team is. Fact is, this team this season has not given up an MLS all-time goals against record, is going to come away with more wins and more points than they did in the previous season. Probably not eliminated from the playoff race yet. Probably not going to make the playoffs, but there is numerical improvement in this season. Yeah.
Kudos to Heath. I mean, you could also call it the Darwin effect. Oh, we won't go down that line of thought necessarily, but yeah, kudos to Heath for that improvement. What was the home record stat in there that you dropped? Could you do that one again?
They are 10-4-1. The only 6 teams in MLS to win 10 or more games at home are both New York teams, Columbus, Portland, Salt Lake, and Minnesota.
And I don't think this necessarily makes the world a difference, but all that, and they're not even playing in their own stadium yet at home.
Yep.
So,
like, they are a dominant team in the state of Minnesota, and you hope that gets even more so as Allianz Field comes into reality moving into next year. I saw a little Allianz Field tidbit. Callum Williams, who's the Minnesota United's TV play-by-play commentator, put up a little video of the view currently from their spot in the press box for next season. And boy, it's starting to look like a real stadium. The design on the seats looks awesome, and they are mostly all in place at this point.
Oh, that's cool. So, I haven't seen that picture. That sounds cool.
If you have time to go track that down on Callum's feed, it's a cool sight, and it's probably going to be pretty close to what we're going to be looking at from the press box next season. So I'm thrilled. Like,
hopefully, was it like central or where was it?
It was a little bit to the right side of the press box, so probably about where they are now.
Okay.
Well, no, because the press box isn't centered in TCF Bank Stadium. So probably like about where our angle is now in TCF Bank.
Is where his is? Or where ours?
His is in the new stadium.
Okay.
So we'll probably be further to the left, probably towards closer to the middle of the field, I would think.
I don't know. That's been shifting a bit. They've been trying to, in all sports, I've been hearing or being told that they're trying to use that more central space for the more luxury box peoples and what have you, which makes sense. Yeah.
So we might be a little bit further to the right, but like that's still fine. Like we're going to be significantly less far away from the gameplay than we are now, which is going to help a lot. Which that was like the thing I noticed most about when I went to watch the game in Kansas City is Kansas City's press box in that soccer specific stadium, Children's Mercy Park in Kansas City, is so much closer to the action, and it makes a world of difference for seeing what's going on.
See, I like that, and I mean, hopefully that's the other thing with the Allianz Field is that it provides better sight lines, which it should, because it's going to be a soccer specific stadium as opposed to
designed for those sight lines. Yeah,
exactly. That would be really ideal.
That's been one of the things they've said about it from the start, is that there's not going to be a bad seat in the house. If they pull it off, awesome.
Yeah. Well, I feel like any stadium would want to say that. I don't know that that's unique. But
yeah,
hopefully
it's one of those PR lines that we'll see what happens once 20,000 fans are in their seats in March. But, it's we'll see. So but I continue to be excited every time I see a new angle or a new view come out, because it's like, I think the nameplate on the outside of the field went up in the last couple of weeks, so it's got its name on it. Like, it's a real thing. It's happening, and it should be completed, ready for next season.
That's fun. I think real quick we should do some math, because I think we'd be remiss to not have a clear stance on this. I was talking with someone last night. I as you said, United's actually mathematically still alive in the postseason, and I think a simple enough scenario that we could paint, and we should check the math, but is that if Real Salt Lake loses out and Minnesota United wins out, they're in, and Salt Lake's out. But I'm not sure on the math on that.
You still need both LA Galaxy and Vancouver to also get less points than Minnesota, because that's the problem. Is like Salt Lake's in 6th. Yes, they are still catchable. The problem is Real's on 46, Galaxy are on 44, Vancouver's on 40, Minnesota's on 36. Like, they've got to leapfrog all of those teams if they want to do it, which is possible,
but pretty unlikely.
Like, it's really rough.
Yeah.
But like they've won 2 on the bounce. If they win out, they hit 48.
And
they've got 4 left.
And what's Salt Lake at right now?
46.
Oh my gosh.
And like, if Seattle loses out, they're at 47. So like,
yeah,
they're not.
I think Seattle out. Yeah, Seattle and Salt Lake, I'm pretty sure play in one of those games. So
yeah, so. But
I guess it's still possible.
Yeah, they're not totally completely eliminated yet. They could be next weekend.
Yeah, I guess I won't bet Tom's mortgage on this one.
I would not do that, especially given they're playing on the road, which comes with all the numbers that like if they win this game and then come home with 2 more games at home, winnable games, including one against the Galaxy. And then if they somehow win these 3 straight and all of these other results come in and they go to Columbus with a chance to go in, then do it. They have to get 3 points this weekend. They've got to get 3 points every weekend, but this weekend's the one with the big old question mark over it.
Okay. I'll call my bookie around Thursday and see how I'm feeling. Tom, be ready to relocate if needed.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, I'm packing my stuff.
And I will say, as to loop back around to our small baseball tie-in that we had at the end of the week, as a fan of a baseball team who on Monday had an 80% chance to make the playoffs were eliminated from the playoff race by Saturday, anything can happen.
Wow, is that what happened?
And honestly, here's the thing: they're called the cardiac cards because they're always the opposite. This has to be the weirdest thing for Cardinals fans.
It's been coming. Like I can talk about that for a long time, but like they ran out of steam and it was gonna happen. So
I blame what's his name, the guy who managed the first half of the year.
I also blame him for everything that's gone wrong.
In your life, or
yes.
Dang, bro.
I hate Mike Matheny a lot. The end.
As much as I hate Jose Mourinho.
Woo! Oh yeah, the Mourinho quote bag experience just keeps getting better and better. Like,
or worse and worse, depends on your perspective.
Or worse and worse, depending on your perspective. Yeah, the one he had today about Manchester United's upcoming game against Valencia in the Champions League. Where did that go? I'm looking forward to the game on Tuesday versus Valencia. I hope the majority of the players, at least a few, have this same kind of feelings.
Yeah.
That's not great.
Yeah. Doesn't inspire confidence.
How long do you think he lasts?
I wish he was gone right now. It's unclear. That's what's confusing is, and I've said this before on the show, but Manchester United ownership is very much a part of this problem, and they are the ones obviously who would pull the string. I mean, not just ownership, actually. Sorry, like ownership and the chairman, Ed Woodward. So both of them are at a problem in all of this, and so yeah, guessing when they're going to pull the plug is, I don't know.
Not soon enough from your perspective, whatever way it goes.
For sure. And here's the sense of like how bad like you feel as a Manchester United supporter with Jose Mourinho is now I'm in the position of wanting them to lose. Like I want them to lose games at this point because the sooner he's out, the quicker the turnaround can begin. And that's how bad of that's about as worse as it can get for a manager to a fan is that he's turned you against your own team.
No, that's not a great situation by any means. Manchester United have Valencia in the Champions League on Tuesday in England at Old Trafford. Tottenham Hotspur, while we're hitting our teams, have welcomed Barcelona to Wembley Stadium this week on Wednesday.
Ooh.
So some spicy midweek games in the Champions League, in addition to all the other ones going on across Europe. I know the MLS playoff race is continuing to get interesting. The renaissance of DC United, who beat the absolute crap out of Montreal this weekend. They're probably going to make the playoffs, which given where they were before the Rooney signing and before their field opened is you could see the run coming, but for how far back they were, it's still a little bit absurd that they're in position to take the sixth playoff spot in the East this coming weekend.
I don't know what's more absurd than making the postseason from that position or that Wayne Rooney's trying this hard in the MLS. Like that.
He looks good.
That's an underdog story. I did not see him caring at all.
And he's the combination of those two things is having this super duper backloaded home schedule for DC's new field at Audi Field, and the Rooney signing, which like people had questions about it, as you do every time an MLS team makes one of these like retirement league signings. Like, how is Zlatan going to be this year? How is Rooney going to be coming in? How is David Villa going to be when he came in? And like Rooney has been a workhorse and a goal scorer and everything you could want from this veteran European designated player, legend of English football, to just go in. And his partnership with Lucho Acosta like has been turn the league upside down. They're a team that like on form, you get into MLS Cup playoffs with a team that's on the kind of form they're in. Who knows?
It's on. It is on.
So yeah, it's a really fun part of the year in terms of soccer in the USA, across the world. Lots and lots of good stuff to watch. In the world of Minnesota sports, Tom, we got a lot going on too, as October is the start of a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, it's been a hectic week or so, probably longer than that. Obviously,
Tom's face looks like he feels like it's been 2 months.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling gaunt. No, I mean obviously the Jimmy Butler saga. We also have some writing about the Derrick Rose breakout, if you want to call it that, in the first preseason game. Obviously the Maurer, what we think is a retirement, or at least this kind of scripted game, which was otherwise meaningless, where he ended up as a catcher at the end of the game. We broke that down. If you want to gamble on all this, go to Mike Gelfand. We got his weekly picks, of course. And then the Everson Griffin, we're tracking that. The Vikings, it went from kind of not much in Minnesota sports to all of a sudden we didn't even mention Wild and kind of some speculation about what could happen to them this season. But yeah, it's nutso, and we're following it every step of the way.
Are the Vikings doomed?
I don't know if I'd go with doom. They do not look like the contenders that they were supposed to be at the beginning of the year. However, the offense came back to life against the Rams. A short week going out to the West Coast on Thursday.
I mean, the defense is the problem.
What
What
which
are
is
they
crazy.
doing?
Yeah, no, I mean,
What are they doing?
Definitely, the defense has been exposed. We obviously will have breakdowns with that. Look at Sam Ekstrom during the week as a daily piece, kind of piece by piece. He's trying to figure out what's going on with the Vikings. But yeah, a lot of intrigue, if not chaos, in Minnesota right now.
It's funny, like the Minnesota United tie-in is Keith had a similar quote. Zimmer had a sterling quote about the defense saying, in my entire career, I've never had a defense performing this poorly, and I don't know what it is. And that's what Heath said when we talked about their egregiously bad road record for Minnesota United.
Yeah.
When we asked
had that
him,
whole podcast on it.
Yeah, when we asked him, when he said, what's going on? Why is that happening? He said, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the thing I've learned about United in its short tenure as an MLS team, they're fitting right in with every other Minnesota sports team. Like, they don't want to be left out. They fit in perfectly. Yes.
So
like they're a Minnesota team through and through, and it's perfect.
Absolutely.
And not to, just so we don't leave anybody out, I just checked this. The NHL regular season starts this week.
Yeah, no, and I think, I mean, Nick, I know you watch hockey a little bit. I haven't caught a lot of the preseason, but it's weird that the Wild haven't made many changes. However, there could have been bad news about Suter, and he looks like he's fine.
Is that what it looks like?
Yeah, and I think with Parise, it seems like his back's coming around, which should be two positive stories, and like a normal media environment probably would capture some headlines, but because they didn't really change their team and because like we kind of know what's going to happen, like they don't understand. You have to do chaotic things in order to get attention in the media market. And so I don't know, maybe something wild, something crazy is going to
and it's they've got like they start at Colorado on Thursday, and then their home opener is against Vegas on Saturday. So that's a big game, right, to kick off your season at home.
And Colorado, always a rivalry game. There's always Minnesota transplants out there, and sometimes fighting in the stands. I'm sure you've seen that and all that. So that's always a fun one to start out with. And then Vegas, obviously, a success story out in the desert, and kind of like even though they lost in the Stanley Cup, I think everyone's talking about them still even outside of hockey world.
You start with Colorado, Chicago, two rivalry-ish games, plus Vegas in the middle of that, the Western Conference champions. Like, that's a great opening 3 games to see where you're at.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how much the preseason matters, how much we can learn other than the health of the players. They're kind of at a weird crunch too, a roster crunch with the defensemen, so I'll have to look at what happens there. But yeah, we Giles and Ben are firing up. Ben, newly married, obviously been preoccupied with that. He'll be back on the podcast. Heather will be doing a weekly piece for that. So we'll have the Wild covered well this season.
So yeah, we got all of your Minnesota sports. Now we got rid of this pesky baseball season, right?
Yeah, this was a bummer. I think it's weird that this is probably the best thing that could have happened, that they actually handled the Mauer thing right. And again, I'm assuming he's retiring, but otherwise just a bummer of a season. I mean, just straight up, it kind of collapsed from the beginning, and they'll be starting March 28th. So without a doubt, it'll be like snowing out or something like that for their first game next year. Yeah.
So that's your look around what else is on zonecoverage.com and the rest of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. We've got a lot of great options for you. The Football Machine, Baseball Podcast, Gambling Podcast, the Hockey Pod. Giles and Ben do an awesome job with that. Dane Moore NBA Show. Like, we've got every kind of coverage you could want in podcast and print. Check out all the other awesome writers we've got on the network. And we've got 4 more games of Minnesota United soccer to go for you guys, with Philadelphia to come, and then Colorado and Los Angeles at TCF Bank Stadium to be Minnesota United's last 2 games at TCF Bank Stadium for a while, hopefully. And then the last game of the year at Columbus. Obviously, United's trying to push to get 50,000 people in the stands for the Los Angeles game on Sunday, October 21st. I think the last thing I saw from United's director of PR, Eric Durkee, is that they've sold 45,000 plus tickets to that game. So that's going to be an event. I'm very excited to see what that stadium looks like with 50,000 people rooting on Minnesota United. And yeah, it's going to be a good close to the season for us. If they somehow manage to get back into the playoff race, that's going to be both hilarious and very fun. So with that, I think we are good for this week's Minnesota Soccer Podcast. Any final thoughts, Nick?
Tip your wait staff.
And tip well. Don't be that guy. Tom.
What?
Low blow.
And with that bombshell, Nick Hallett at Prince Hallett on Twitter, Tom Schreier at T-Schreier3 on Twitter. I am David Naylor at Prof Cedar. This has been the Minnesota Soccer Podcast. We will see you in October next week.